Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa mawalah. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that was collected by the Imam al-Bukhari on authority of Jabir ibn Abdullah, he says, ﷺ, Allah favored me with 5 things over all of the previous prophets. And one of those 5 things, and he says, ﷺ, جُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala turned the whole earth as a place of worship for me, where he says, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to where whenever any member of my ummah catches the time for the prayer, let him pray. That would be his masjid. In previous nations, it was not permissible for someone to pray except in a place of worship, be it monastery or a church or a place of worship. It has to be area designated specifically just for the worship. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed that for the Prophet ﷺ and for us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed the earth as the space where the worship is not only vertical, only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning the actual worship through the prayer as we know it, as the Prophet ﷺ demonstrated it, and how we learned it by demonstration from the Prophet ﷺ. And it is not uniquely vertical, but rather also the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala horizontally, meaning with those around us, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made that clear in Surah Yasin, that Allah ta'ala will record for each and every individual his good deeds that are done individually, as well as good deeds that would be generated from services that it would render to other people, and he would leave them behind. In other words, if as the Prophet ﷺ made reference to the 3 channels through which a person will keep generating good deeds while that person had already left this world, meaning in his grave, and yet keeps generating good deeds based on the services that he left behind, where people are benefiting from those services. And this is the essence of what the duality Islam came to give as a comprehensive view and a roadmap for any Muslim to work horizontally as well as vertically. And vertically is all forms of acts of worship: fasting, Hajj, Umrah, Sadaqah, prayer, Quran. These are all individually, these are access points and access mediums and instruments to good deeds, but they connect us directly with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on an individual basis. But horizontally, it is also a huge and a vast array of instruments and means and ways to generate even more good deeds, to where if you were to think about a task, let's say, that could be performed by one individual, would probably take that person a long period of time to perform, versus if a group of people come together to perform the exact same task, it will be done so ever quickly. And if you were to think about that same concept, when a person is trying to generate good deed for himself, based on his own personal effort, through the vertical acts of worship, be it Salah, Quran, those are not to be dismissed. But if you were to think about services that a person could be engaged in and participate in, to where other people will benefit from, the more people benefit from that, the more good deeds come. If that service would allow 100 people to benefit from, then that person is gonna will generate the reward of 100 people down in his record. This is why the incentive concept in Islam is a motivator to really launch not only in the vertical acts of worship, but also the horizontal work and engagement and participation. Hence the civic participation, the civic engagement in any public engagement and for programs and with organizations, because the collective work is a blessed work, and taking part in it, it's not something that we're disciplined to do, but it doesn't mean that we should miss out on it. Learn how to be of service and be a person who is always looking for opportunities to lend a hand. As the Prophet ﷺ made that, subhanallah, comparison for Abu Dhar. And he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in a hadith that was collected by Imam al-Tirmidhi and Ahmad and Abu Dawood, he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, shall I tell you about a deed and work that is higher in reward and in degree in the eyes of Allah than fasting, prayer, and sadaqah? Imagine these. These, what they have in common is these are individually fulfilled and individually performed, and the reward is going to be for the individual himself. But he says, sallallahu, and they said, Ya Rasulullah, please do. He says, to be of service to others, to be of service to others. And he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in other hadith, he says, alayhi salatu wasalam, if I were given the choice between making i'tikaf, meaning devoting all of my time in my masjid for a whole month of worship in my masjid. So you have the reward of the act of worship, which is i'tikaf, and there is the full devotion for the worship of Allah through either prayer, Quran, dhikr, and everything in one secluded area, but not any secluded area. This is the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. So you have the multiple reward for the acts of worship you do, and the multiple reward also because of the blessed space, which is the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ says. But he says, if I were to be given the choice of doing that versus going out and helping another fellow Muslim or a human being, I will go with the second choice than with the first one. And he speaks to exactly how civic engagement and civic participation, where we have a distorted operational definition in our mind that we should revisit and redefine, because we're missing out on so much reward for ourselves and the blessings that we could generate not only for ourselves in the hereafter, but in this life. As they say, what goes around comes around. Pay it forward. Every time you do something good, it'll come back to pay you sooner than later in our sensory physical world before even we leave this world. And this is an area that we should rethink and revisit and rather get the definition given to us by the Prophet ﷺ, to where we have the balance and the equilibrium of not only being a person of service and productive in our physical world, but also a person who does that with the intention in mind to get the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the akhirah and the blessing for this life. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us amongst those who, when they hear the speech, they follow the best of it. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyina Muhammad walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.